Greetings, this is Chuck Dunning, and I welcome you to this video essay, Boxes, Serving Within and Beyond. The views expressed here are my own unless noted otherwise. Before we get into the essay, I'd like to highlight that the image in this first slide is the jewel worn by the most wise master of the 18th degree, Knight Rosicrucianism, as it is practiced in some jurisdictions of the Scottish Rite. I think the division of the cross into 5 equally sized squares, or boxes, correlates nicely with the title of this essay. The fact that together they contain the Pentagrammaton, a 5-letter divine name from esoteric Christianity, has clear relevance to a very important point made near the end of the essay. As we proceed, please keep in mind that, other than this jewel, the referenced version of the Rose-Croix degree is the one currently used by the Southern jurisdiction of the USA. And since that is the jurisdiction that I participate in, I will be continuing to use the common pronunciation Rose-Croix rather than the probably more proper French Rose-Croix. Now, let's get going. In a previous video essay, I drew from my book A Rose-Croix Oratory to illustrate that the 18th degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite is symbolically connected with the Rosicrucian movement. I won't reiterate the details of that argument here, but I do want to draw a parallel between some fundamental philosophical tenets of the 18th degree and Rosicrucianism. In doing so, I will also explore some psychological, social, and spiritual challenges commonly encountered by those seeking both deeper philosophical insight and opportunities to serve others. According to the Scottish Rite Ritual Monitor and Guide by De Hoyos, quote, "The Knights Rose-Croix practice charity in all its aspects, and they derive strength to labor in the cause of humanity from faith and hope. The Knight Rose-Croix is bound to give charity to the poor, whether Masonic or not, to visit those in prison and the sick, and to give them aid in their necessities according to his means." End quote. Here are the first 2 articles of agreement found in the Rosicrucian Fama Fraternitatis. Quote, "First, that none of them should profess any other thing than to cure the sick, and that gratis." End quote. The resonance between this article and the duties of a Knight Rose-Croix is obvious. Both are committed to lives of service. And while the Fama apparently limits the Rosicrucian profession to curing the sick, subsequent apologists in the Rosicrucian movement have held that this point applies to a very broad range of physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and social ailments, as well as their treatments. Now, let's move on to the second article, which says, quote, "None of the posterity should be constrained to wear one certain kind of habit, but therein to follow the custom of the country." End quote. While the Knight Rose-Croix degree has nothing approximating this statement, it does require its initiates to honor each person's freedom of conscience and religion, and especially to refrain from imposing one's own views and beliefs on others. The relevance of this principle to the second point of the Rosicrucian agreements may become clearer as we proceed. So, what if we regard a habit, as mentioned in the second Rosicrucian article, to not only be literal clothing, but also an allegorical statement with a wider scope? What if a habit, a manner of dress that overtly identifies one with a particular spiritual tradition, is analogous to the metaphorical boxes that society creates to categorize and control people, including religious beliefs and affiliations? What if we show no special concern for exclusively aligning with a new box, but instead recognize and serve within the boxes that are already in place. For those of you on paths of service, I invite you to consider the paradox we live as psycho-spiritual helpers, the delicate and sometimes painful tension between the boxes we must inhabit and the deeper truths we carry within. These boxes, the social norms, roles, identities, and expectations, can be both our shelter and our prison. Sometimes we have boxes within boxes and adjoining boxes, and we find ourselves moving along the edges or from one box to another. Certainly these boxes can be truthful and useful in some ways, but they come with costs. They shape how we speak, how we act, even who we pretend to be. They limit who we connect with and relate to as companions. They fracture the wholeness of the human soul and mask the unity beneath. And they are pervasive, insidious, and often intractable. Even people who recognize and rail against boxes, such as in pushing back against the idea of various psychosocial identities, still find themselves falling into the pattern of boxing up others and themselves in various ways. It seems to be an instinctive mental process, and one that often operates with little to no conscious awareness. It's no wonder that those who have woken up to the presence of such boxes often wish to escape them, ignore them, or even burn them down. But even if we're not afraid for ourselves, to leave our boxes risks losing connection with those who continue to identify with them, people who love us, whom we love, and whom we wish to help. If we leave, we risk seeming like strangers, outsiders, or traitors who must be distrusted and rejected. If we attempt to return, we may be seen as intruders or invaders who must be opposed. If we try to ignore the boxes, then the people who identify with them understandably feel that we're ignoring them, in part, if not entirely. If we try to destroy the boxes, or merely advocate for their destruction, we are bound to be perceived and attacked as the most dangerous of villains. On the other hand, if we can demonstrate some understanding, respect, and care for the boxes people identify with, then those people are more likely to feel personally understood, respected, and cared for by us. Both the negative and positive reactions are perfectly understandable because, in exchange for loyalty, boxes offer safety, belonging, support, and a sense of meaning. So to serve others effectively, we may choose some level of cooperation with the boxes, and thus speak their languages and wear the costumes they require. Consequently, following this path of service can lead to encountering conflicts between personal authenticity and social acceptability. If we persist in trying to serve those identifying with their boxes, then this challenge can sometimes seem to call for a kind of psychosocial mimicry, a dance on a razor's edge that feels at times like betrayal of the self, hypocrisy, or worse, calculated and duplicitous manipulation. History is rich with those who have known the edges of their boxes, moved from one box to another, and managed the challenges with courage. Take Paracelsus, the rebellious healer, who refused the sterile dogmas of his day and insisted on the living pulse of nature and spirit. His fierce fire burned through old forms, without burning down the whole house. He was both a part of the system and its transmuter, a living paradox of healer and heretic. Or consider Jakob Böhme, the shoemaker whose visions pierced the boxes of orthodox doctrine and belief. Speaking the language of his Lutheran world, he nevertheless whispered of cosmic darkness and light, inner death and rebirth. He taught us that speaking truth in an unready world requires humility, patience, and the courage to carry both revelation and rejection. Then there is Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, the unknown philosopher, whose quiet, contemplative walk epitomized the way of the heart. He did not storm the gates, but gently opened the door from within, weaving spiritual freedom and the ideal of reintegration through the structures of society. His life teaches the art of compassionate containment, living inside the boxes while inviting others beyond them through his presence and example. And finally, Jesus of Nazareth, who walked the most visible and perilous of edges. Fully human, he inhabited the brutal religious, social, and political boxes of first-century Palestine, yet challenged their limits with a radical message of love, mercy, and the coming kingdom of God. He dined with tax collectors and sinners, defied pietistical legalism, and publicly taught in parables, but more plainly in private with his inner circle. His ministry repeatedly revealed the tension between conformity and dissent, between speaking truth and exercising compassion. Jesus' humanity shines through in moments of deep struggle and vulnerability. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he wrestled with the weight of his mission, praying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet, not my will, but yours be done." His cry of abandonment on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" echoes the profound inner conflict of living a truth and serving a love that can ironically increase one's own sense of isolation and agony. The Gospel of Thomas, an early collection of Jesus' sayings, adds a layer of mystical depth to this portrayal. Saying 70 reads, quote, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." End quote. When we move between our boxes and walk their edges mindfully and prayerfully, we can come to recognize something profound. Even within those boxes, no matter how confining, fractured, or unconscious they may appear, we encounter the immanent presence of the Absolute, the One that is the source of all. Furthermore, those souls fully identified with their boxes are themselves living embodiments of that One, even if they cannot sense it. Each person, each soul, is a sacred vessel containing the ineffable spark of the divine. Here is the call to authenticity amidst constraint, the imperative to let the hidden light shine through the cracks of every box. This path demands humility, the courage of faith, the patience of hope, and unyielding love. Love for the divine, love for those we serve, for those who regard us as enemies, and for ourselves. It calls us to hold paradox without collapse, to bandage the wounds between fragments of the whole, to be bridges between silence and sound, darkness and light. In walking this path, we become living alchemists, transmuting separation into unity, division into wholeness, and fear into grace. The lives of Paracelsus, Burma, San Martin, and Jesus remind us that the boxes are not merely barriers, but vessels, imperfect containers for the sacred flame. As servants and healers, our task is not to burn the boxes, but to become the light passing through their cracks. To be at once inside and beyond, speaking aloud in the necessary language while listening deeply to the silent voice within. To see and serve others in this way, to hold the paradox that the box both confines and carries the mystery of God, transforms our work. It dissolves the temptations toward judgment and rage or despair. It invites compassion and respect, reminding us that no box is ultimately separate from the whole, no identity wholly apart from the divine source. Then our boxes may become beautiful lanterns, shining with the healing light of love from within. This concludes the essay. Thank you for listening, and I hope there is something here that you have found helpful in understanding what it means to be a Night Rose Croix and a Rosicrucian servant.